So this morning, June 17th, the devotional opens with a quote from John Wesley. At the end of his life, he declared, "The best of all, God is with us." And so there's a simple prayer that follows that we found in the devotional this morning. Best of all, God, you are with us. We could just end it right there. Be the shortest devotional ever, but I'll continue. Acts chapter 9, verses 1 through 9. This is the conversion of Saul. Saul, still breathing threats and murder against the disciples of the Lord, went to the high priest and asked him for letters to the synagogues at Damascus, so that if he found any who belonged to the way, which is sort of the first name of what we now call Christianity, if he found any who belonged to the way, men or women, he might bring them bound to Jerusalem. Now, as he was going along and approaching Damascus, suddenly a light from heaven flashed around him. He fell to the ground and heard a voice saying to him, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" He asked, "Who are you, Lord?" The reply came, "I am Jesus whom you're persecuting. But get up, enter the city, and you'll be told what you're to do." The men who were traveling with him stood speechless because they heard the voice, but saw no one. Saul got up from the ground, and though his eyes were open, he could see nothing. So they led him by the hand and brought him to Damascus. For 3 days he was without sight and neither ate nor drank. So we have Saul going out to try and find people who were part of this rebellious and heretical sect known as the Way, and he was going to bring them to justice in Jerusalem. So there's three things that I think that sort of stood out to me this morning, and I think they have interesting insight for us as we find ourselves in a unique place as the church, in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of some social upheaval in our world. First thing is this: just like Saul, I think sometimes our zeal for righteousness leads us on a path toward destruction. I think there are some people in our world, in our church, who are utterly convinced and very genuine and authentic and true in their sense that they are doing what's right, and yet sometimes that zeal for righteousness can actually lead toward a path of destruction, and so we always need to be willing to let Jesus break in to the ways in which we are moving toward what we assume to be righteousness. And with that, second, is that Jesus can redeem us on the path toward destruction. That Jesus is the one who can break in and show us the true path toward redemption and salvation, and lead us away from that path toward destruction. And third, that simply, like Saul, I think sometimes the first step toward redemption, as Jesus brings us out of that path toward destruction, I think sometimes the first step toward redemption is a disorienting blindness. And then we move forward. And I think for many in the church right now, there is this overwhelming sense of a disorienting blindness. Some people are just entering the conversation about how there is a broad pandemic beyond COVID-19 that our country is facing, and terms like racial injustice and racial reconciliation and systemic injustice and all that stuff. Those are terms that cause this sort of disorienting blindness, and that's, I think that for me is a sign that God is on the move, and that God is interjecting and redeeming and saving some people from this path toward destruction as they are on it, assuming that they're on the path toward righteousness, and that God is breaking in and redeeming, but part of that process sometimes can be a disorienting blindness. And best of all, just like John Wesley said, best of all, in the midst of all of this, in the midst of a COVID pandemic, in the midst of a pandemic of racism, best of all, God is with us. So God, we thank you. The best of all, you are with us in this, and you're leading us. Continue to lead us as we seek your will. Amen.